Open my eyes that I may see fullness of truth thou hast for me. Place in my hands the wonderful key that shall unclasp and set me free. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, my will to see. Open my eyes, illumine me, Spirit divine. Open my ears that I may hear voices of truth thou sendest clear. And while the wave notes fall on my ear, everything false will disappear. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my eyes, illumine me, Spirit divine. Open my ears, illumine me, Spirit divine.
And so it is that we come together this morning in the beautiful, amazing, infinite recognition that the spirit of life is all there is. That no matter what you call it, God, Buddha, Atman, the thing itself, the one source, that each one of us is an expression of that infinite one. And so we open our hearts and our minds and anchor in to this spiritual truth that guides and directs our life, that the presence and the power of this infinite one is wholeness and goodness, is ongoing perfection, divine freedom, infinite beauty, absolute joy, pure, unconditional love, and so much more. And so I know for each of us this morning that as we open and recognize and unify with this one, that whatever it is that needs to be healed and released and let go of is already happening. That we allow the Spirit to guide and direct our lives. That everything that takes place this morning is for the healing and the restoration of each one of us individually and globally, collectively. So I know that there is a power in this word that resonates with the spiritual truth of divine goodness and wholeness, that it is reflected and unfolding and being experienced for each one of us in our own unique way and for our highest good. So it is with a deep sense of gratitude and acceptance that I release and I let go, I let God. And I invite you to accept what you resonate with here as your own truth and to affirm together with me, and so it is. Thank you, Rod, for that beautiful song. Open my eyes that I may see. Amen. And hear. Yeah. So I have a video, about a 10-minute video that I want to share with you. And this was recorded and put out by the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, which is a center for spiritual living, in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day. And what they have done, as you will see, is being called a libation ceremony, a water ceremony for healing. And then afterward, after the Atlanta folks have done, the representatives of that community have done their part, there will be some other people from around the country that will also participate. So before I share that with you, a little preamble to sharing the video is just something that I wanted to share with you. October 11th was set aside by many states, and this is a continually changing thing, as the day to recognize and honor Indigenous people, their culture, their history, and the brutal and violent history that they suffered, beginning with Columbus and others who followed. What began as a natural spiritual desire to explore and to discover unknown territories turned to a consciousness of ownership and conversion at all costs of these Indigenous peoples of North America. The Centers for Spiritual Living as a whole body envisions a world that works for everyone, a world that works for all. We realize that for true and lasting healing to take place, there must be an awareness of the truth of what happened and an acceptance of the ongoing inequities that our nation continues to perpetuate upon Indigenous people today. Out of this awareness, the consciousness of healing can take place, and there will be a growing collective consciousness of restoration and inclusion. Social justice is an outpicturing of divine justice. And to live a spiritual life means to be in alignment with divine justice. The truth is that when one suffers, we all suffer, for we are one manifest body of a universal Mother, Father, God. I'm sharing my screen and starting the video. And Judy, I can see you really well. If for some reason it doesn't play or you don't hear the sound in a moment, please give me a wave or something, okay? Thank you. Yep. Well, since I'm already sharing my screen, you get to watch me do this.
Good morning. My name is
Does that mean it's good?
Pardon. And tomorrow, much of this country will celebrate Columbus Day. It is no secret at this point that Columbus Day in 1492 was just the beginning of a terrible and brutal history of violence and oppression toward indigenous people of the Americas. Columbus and those who followed were obsessed with conversion, brought diseases, and ultimately desecrated entire peoples and cultures. Today, we want to acknowledge this history. Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta conducts spiritual services, classes, and gatherings on the stolen territory of the Muskogee, the Creek people. Today, we turn our conscious attention to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. We give praise and honor to the original stewards of the land we occupy and further dedicate ourselves to a consciousness of inclusion, healing, and restoration.
Descendants of mound builders, the Muskogee people were expelled from their ancestral lands, which include the areas now known as Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. Before the United States government stole their homelands, they lived in sophisticated autonomous tribal towns that together formed a multi-part union known as the Muskogee Creek Confederacy. Most Muskogee in the area of present-day Georgia were speakers of Hittichi, one of the multiple Muskogean languages and one of the many indigenous languages which has perished due to European invasion and genocide. Other cultural practices, like the sharing of all property and making communal decisions by consensus, were extirpated in the process of forced assimilation with the economy and culture of European colonists. Many indigenous religious practices were outlawed in the United States by the government or restricted due to lack of access to sacred sites and water.
The Muskogee people were repeatedly forced to defend their land at great loss as British, French, and Spanish factions battled for control of the area. Many Muskogee left their ancestral homelands after signing treaties with the United States in the early 1800s, often without receiving the compensation promised in the treaties. Most relocated to Indian Territory in Oklahoma, but tens of thousands who refused to leave were forcibly removed by the U.S. Army following the Indian Removal Act of the Trail of Tears. Although precise numbers are poorly documented, it is estimated that nearly half of Muskogee people were lost their lives on the Trail of Tears. Those who survived were met with more disease, starvation, and injustice upon their arrival to Indian Territory. Today, the Muskogee people are spread between Alabama, Oklahoma, and other areas of the southeastern U.S. The lasting effects of colonization and genocide are glaringly apparent in the economic, social, and judicial injustices that indigenous people suffer at the hands of the U.S. government. Additionally, monuments to colonizers, slavers, and murderers are still prominent throughout our city and country, including here in Atlanta, Georgia, as exemplified by the eminent thoroughfare Ponce de Leon Avenue, a street named for a man who led European expeditions to Turtle Island in pursuit of gold and a mythical fountain of youth, resulting in brutal genocide, enslavement of native peoples, and the spread of disease.
I'm crying because the blood of these people runs through my veins. I am Creek Indian. My grandmother was from that tribe. And today we are called to remember and to initiate the healing beginning with our own consciousness. As we open to healing the wounds of separation from within, we become carriers of wholeness to the collective body. We use water as our ritual element today. Water is more than simply a metaphor. It is an elemental and primary calling forth feelings of awe and reverence, acknowledging that the ocean is considered by many to be the place from which all life on our planet came. It is the womb of life, and that amniotic waters surround each of us prenatally. We choose water as our symbol of our empowerment. Water connects each of us to Mother Earth, as well as connects us across the land via the many rivers, tributaries, waterways that serve as the source of life for Indigenous tribes. We recognize SLCA as a source of spiritual life and connection for people across Turtle Island, and include each place in our consciousness today, several of which will be included in the libation recognition ceremony that we are now initiate. We begin with where we are. From the unceded territory of the Muskogee Creek tribe, known today as Atlanta, Georgia, we pour out our libations and blessings in remembrance of the Muskogee and Creek peoples, my people, our people. Ashe. Ashe.
From the unceded territory of the Great and Little Osage Nation, known today as Kansas City, Missouri, we pour out a libation and a blessing of remembrance for the Osage, Kickapoo, Kaw, and the Osheti-Shikoe people.
From the unceded territory of the Wapakudi, known today as St. Paul, Minnesota, we pour out a libation and blessing of remembrance for the Wapakudi peoples.
From the unceded territory of the Ute, the Pueblos, and the Ikaria Apache, now known as Taos, New Mexico, we pour out libation and offer a blessing of remembrance. For the Ute peoples, for the Pueblos peoples, for the Ikaria Apache peoples.
In honor of the original inhabitants of this land, now known as Northwest Oregon, we honor the land. The Douglas firs, the cedars, the oaks, the redwoods that gave homes and sustenance to the Native Americans who also occupied this land. We mourn the now gone salmon that fed the bodies of these indigenous people. Unfortunately, the colonization of this land, trees, and resources continues today. And from the unceded territory of Kalapuya, the Clackamas, the Tuolumne Native, peoples on the lands and lakes of Chief Oswego, we pour out a libation and blessing of remembrance for these sovereign peoples.
From the unceded territory of the Shasta, Tequilma, Modoc, and Klamath tribes, known today as Ashland, Oregon, I pour out a libation and blessing of remembrance for the tribes of the Shasta, Tequilma, Modoc, and
Having heard and received the blessings and libation recognition from the very
The Indigenous Peoples Day was first presented to the United Nations in 1977. And South Dakota was the first state to replace Columbus Day in 1984 with honoring Indigenous Peoples Day. There are many countries, many states in our United States that are doing dual celebrations on different days. And from the research, the little bit of research that I did, it looks like California takes one step forward toward that and one step back. But there is a very strong recognition. And so for our specific area, the Maidu peoples, and it might be Maidu, I'm not sure, occupied this land. And I don't know if your experience has been anything like mine from what we were taught in grade school compared to what we are aware of now. That growing awareness it's not always comfortable. When old paradigms begin to crumble and we see the effect of causes that have been set in motion. And I had the thought while watching the video that the water ceremony and the mentioning of the water being cleansing and healing. And if any of you felt yourselves tear up, that is a beginning of our own healing, that tears are healing, that tears are an outpicturing of a heart opening, of feelings of compassion and recognition of suffering. So I think that this is, in any way that any of you might want to do any kind of a recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day or to do any research about it, I'm going to put out in the eBlast a very comprehensive, easy to read list of links that go into where you can search maps and anything that is of interest to you. But I truly and in a heartfelt way invite you to consider, to think about, to recognize your own perspective and your own feelings about this. And with the idea of becoming more aware of what you're committed to in terms of a world that works for everyone. And as I said earlier, a world that works for everyone is based on spiritual justice, divine justice, wholeness, peace, love, compassion. And it's really striking to me anyways, to recognize that as spiritual beings, and Dr. Holmes talked about this in great length in the book, This Thing Called You, that we have this natural creative impulse and that expresses itself through us to explore, to be adventurers, to discover new territories. And when we're coming, and that's a territory within our own consciousness. So this ceremony gives us an opportunity to explore the territory of our own consciousness and where we might feel indifferent. And and make our own decisions and be curious about any of those feelings of indifference. For all of this change goes into creating a world that works for everyone. And I know at a very elemental, basic level that we all agree that that is what we want. And we want to be peoples of compassion, of change, of healing. And in order for that to happen, we have to recognize what actually happened and the suffering that took place. So that we can, in the creating a world that works for everyone, including ourselves, that we can be coming from the place of oneness as opposed to separation. And that the truth is that we're all just stewards of the earth. Nobody owns the earth. And in actuality, we don't really own anything. It's a manifestation of God, of infinite good. Everything that we have is a manifestation of infinite good, and that we are stewards of. So what a beautiful opportunity that we have to look at this in a multifaceted way. In a multifaceted way. In a little book that I have called The Principle of Oneness, the author writes, God, the universe, is a democracy of one. We are a multi-personality, multi-dimensional being existing everywhere and in every time. Beyond time and space is where the truth of our being resides. Our collective consciousness is in charge, co-creating the illusion of reality through the various branches of individual consciousness. So I say that the more that we are grounded in the one, in the heart of God, which is infinite love, expressing as compassion and oneness for all, health and wholeness, and abundance and freedom, freedom of expression, equal freedom to live and to be stewards of earth and to be a part of caring for this incredible manifest body of God known as the planet. I see that in a big way as our charge, that which we have been given the opportunity to do. And I trust and invite all of you to trust that whatever it is, however that is personalized through you, that you have everything that it takes to step forward in the exploration of new territories with an open, compassionate heart, with the knowing that what we do to ourselves and to another affects the whole collective consciousness. So thank you for joining me today in this endeavor. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment as we prepare for our offering, knowing that what is most important is the consciousness with which we give, knowing that our gift moves out into the universe, that it is activated, it is filled with an impulse of our own consciousness and moves out through our spiritual community, through the Center for Spiritual Living Paradise, and beyond to people that are open and receptive and are drawn to this way of life, this way of thinking. And that it circulates back toward us, that the receiving is in the giving, the feeling, the consciousness, the love, the acceptance of the fact that we are being spiritually fed. And so we circulate. And we know that divine love through each one of us blesses and multiplies all that we give, all that we have, and all that we receive. And together we affirm, I give joyfully with a consciousness of abundance. I give joyfully with a consciousness of abundance. I give joyfully with a consciousness
of abundance.